So thanks for coming, everyone. I'm Simone Bennett, and this is my colleague Ben, who I worked with in another life.
Hi guys, my name is Ben Houghton, and let me just first start by saying that we all already know that we're supposed to be doing proactive maintenance in our environments. But putting this into practice isn't always so easy. When Simone and I worked together, we spent a lot of time going through and removing a lot of the unnecessary clutter from our environments. And in that time, we collected a pretty big inventory of different tools and scripts that can make your life as a Windows administrator a lot easier. All we'd like to do today is run you through some of these tools and scripts in the hopes that it will help you to discover what's in your environment, to identify where the issues are in the reports that get generated from your discovery, to fix the issues that you've found in those reports, and then some tips and procedures you can put in place to keep your environment looking good over the long term. Handle first.
So we all love coming to these conferences, or at least I do, and you see all this awesome stuff that you'd love to go back to work and implement. But oftentimes I would personally find I'll go back to work and I couldn't put it into place because there was roadblocks around technology. So I couldn't upgrade all my workstations to the latest version because of some proprietary app, or it's not as easy as they say to just upgrade your domain functional level to get the latest features. Or sometimes the roadblocks were less about technology and more just about my time. So you're running around maintaining an environment that breaks every day, and the thought of adding more complexity and more things that can break is just too much to consider. So you just postpone all the new stuff as well because you have to learn it. But we all know that our industry is changing and that less and less we're the gatekeepers, and more what users want is the credit card transaction away. So if we keep saying no and trying to dictate how fast new technology is implemented, they'll just go around us and get what they want somehow or the other. So we've proven that throughout standardizing and documenting our environment, we can focus more on abstraction and automation, which we all know is the future, so that other people can do those day-to-day tasks and we can learn new stuff and implement new things and be innovative. And throughout standardizing and documenting our environment and cleaning up all the mess, which I'm guessing you all have because you're here, the benefits were twofold. We need consistency to be time efficient. So the reason that we focused on cleaning things and standardizing things and renaming stuff and cleaning up all those roadblocks was so that we could be efficient. And when you're efficient, you don't have to do everything yourself because you can hand those tasks off to other people in your team. Maybe the junior staff can do that stuff once you show them one time. So a good part of my time has been spent standardizing environments and migrating companies in as they were purchased. We both worked for a company that acquired a lot of businesses regularly. So we go to site and migrate them into our environment and standardize them with our standards. And we found that as we did that, the time we took to standardize them as we brought in meant that other people could carry out tasks and other people could support that environment without coming to us every time for help. So the benefits for us were that we could farm out tasks to the help desk, each other, or contract staff even if we needed, but still get a consistent outcome. So the rest of our team could still support our environment without our input every time. Obviously, when it's consistent, it's easier to support. And when other people support it, it's not all up to you. So if you're one of those people that gets annoyed because, say, help desk comes to you before they try and resolve an issue, it might be just that they have no idea where to get started. In addition, the business trusted us more. And as we improved our process, the users were happier with the transition as well. So we had less downtime and happier users. And really, that translates to the business seeing us as visible and valuable, which is quite hard as IT pros, as you know. It's a really good way to prove that you're worth investing in and your team's worth investing in. So today, we're going to talk about a few things. Naming standards, which I'm sure you're excited about this early in the morning. Active Directory and all the components of that. Workstations, and Ben's going to show you some really cool ways to audit and clean up your file servers and your file share permissions. One thing to mention is that the steps we're going to go through are both scalable and repeatable. So if you manage a really big environment that changes a lot, this is suitable. And if you manage a small environment that's quite static, this is also suitable. Just be much faster for you. So Ben will tell you what tools are available.
Thank you. So for the discovery, there's a lot of tools that you can use in your environment. We're just going to quickly run you through some of the tools that we've used in the past before we get started in the talk. So the main tool that we use quite heavily is PowerShell. And a lot of the discovery that we've used in the environment is done using PowerShell scripts. But there are a lot of tools that we think deserves a mention. First of all, it's really important as an admin that you get to know your sysinternals apps. A lot of the other tools we talk about today are straight from this pack, and they're really essential for any admin who wants to maintain a clean environment. Now, to perform your discovery, we've both in the past used a product called Landsweeper, and this is a very cheap, easy to implement solution that can very easily discover everything in your environment. You simply just install it, add in your subnets, and let it do its thing. Not only that, it has all the reports that you need for the discovery already built into the application. So you just select the ones you want, and you can set them to be emailed to you weekly if you want to. Now, as you go through and perform the discovery of your environment, you're going to be left over with a lot of sensitive information, and it's really important that you have a secure place to store all of this information. Specifically with service accounts, what we found is if you don't use a password manager to store these accounts, what happens is they just end up sitting in an Excel spreadsheet somewhere on a file server, which is locked down with an ACL, but really it's not that secure, especially for shared service account passwords. So 2 password managers that we've used in the past are Password Manager XP and LastPass. Now, products like Config Manager have the potential to save yourself a lot of time managing your environment when they're properly implemented. Now, if you're a medium to large organisation, they really have the potential to make a truly positive impact within your organisation. Now, it's true that it does take some setting up, and there is some training involved for the technical staff, like your help desk and your admin team. But once it's in and running, you will realise that you've been doing things the hard way this whole time. One of the best things that I've found about this product is that it has the ability to transform the teams that work within your organisation. Instead of your help desk installing one update to one application on one PC for one user, they're downloading that update, importing it into SCCM into a package or an application, and then performing a controlled release of that application across all the desktops in the organisation that require it. Instead of your help desk downloading and installing one image of a desktop, say Windows 10, for one user, they're downloading that update, importing it into a task sequence, and then rolling out the new image across all the desktops in one go that require it. And it's this kind of automation that can save you a lot of time in the long run that you can use to innovate. It's important to note as well that if you've got an enterprise agreement with Microsoft and use core CALs to cover your Lync, SharePoint, and Exchange CALs for your desktops, you're also covered for the SCCM desktop management license.
So today we're going to rapidly go through a bunch of different topics, and to save us repeating ourselves, these apply to everything. So obviously, communicate with your team. So if you explain to your team what you're doing and where you're documenting things and why you're making these changes, there's a good chance they will understand and they'll also help you along, and they won't just go back to doing what you're trying to clean up. Document what you find, and that doesn't mean creating big static as-built document that you just file away on SharePoint or a file server. I like to use the description fields in every console. It's kind of like dynamic documentation, and it's right there wherever somebody's trying to find the information. So if you use the description fields, it's really helpful. Obviously, back stuff up before you blast it. You're going to make some mistakes. It's inevitable. But if you can restore those services quickly, then everyone will be fine. And lock everything down. So once you've gone to the effort of making things wonderful, you need to lock it down and delegate permissions. And Ben will go through that later on. Finally, everything we're about to refer to, so there's a bunch of PowerShell scripts and tools and documentation, and we've got some templates. We've put it all together in a zip file that you can download at the end. So you don't need to try and write down script names or anything like that. So when we zip through, don't worry. We've packaged it all up, and you can just download it and you can get started. You can just forget the rest of the conference and go back to work and
You can go home straight after this
get started right now.
Go put it in.
You're going to be keen, so it's fine. Okay, so if I will, I'll tell you a quick story. I used to, in 2005, when 2003 Server was still new, I worked for a little software company with a bunch of really cool devs, and they maintained their environment collectively before they brought me along. And all the workstations there were named after comic book characters, as makes sense, I suppose, and all the servers were named after Lord of the Rings, so Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn. Which is fine, I guess, in a small team where you communicate and everybody understands the process. I was used to name them, but it didn't, I can't remember it, but it did make sense at the time. But as they brought on more people and that software went to market, their staff expanded rapidly. And for anyone else who wasn't in their team and didn't understand that process, figuring out that Exchange was Legolas or the software share was Gimli was just too hard. It was too impossible. So that's where a naming standard can be helpful. So if you want to delegate tasks around in your team and you want people to come to you once they've already tried to fix something, you need to give them a chance to find things and guess what's happening based on the names of devices. So this is an example of the naming standard that Ben and I have used in the past, and I've used it at lots of workplaces. And we've put a document about this in the download pack, so you're welcome to download and adapt it to your organisation. But generally, just put in a site code, so we create all of our sites with site codes. Then a function code, so dev or print or gateway or whatever, they're all in there. And then an increment, and then if it's internal, external. And when we worked for a big international, we added the country code at the beginning, so AU or US, to make it easy. So it's really easy when you see an alert come in, you know what site it is and what type of server. So if it's a print server, you might not get up at 3 a.m. to fix that, but if it's Exchange or a firewall, you might. And if you wanted to target something with a script or group policy or whatever, you can use the preferences in group policy, you know, with the naming field, and you can just target anything with like PRT in the name, and then add your help desk to local admins or whatever you need. So you don't need to do that manually, and you can target things really easily. Or if we wanted to target all the PCs at Brooklyn, we'd use the BR01 site code. It's nice and easy. So as I said, the document for that is in the download pack, but this is my tips for success if you want to get a naming standard in. Obviously, keep it broad enough that your whole team can use it. So if it's really specific just to servers, you'll find that maybe your server team uses it, but everybody else generates their own naming standard, and it's not really valuable. If it's broad enough to apply to your network team and your dev team and everyone else in your environment, everyone will start to understand those codes and the site codes, and it will just become standard and everyone will use it. Obviously publish it and make it accessible, so no one's going to remember all that off by heart, so I normally just give everyone a little A4 and they help desk stick it up on their wall. But if it's somewhere central in your SharePoint or your knowledge base, then people can refer to it and use it. Get people on board, so just explain it to your team and give them a chance to understand why you think it's a good idea, or why I think it's a good idea. And obviously discourage ad hoc changes. So if you're changing it every day and adding really specific function codes into there, it will get really big and no one will use it because it's too hard to refer to and too hard to remember what all the things mean. So I just try and keep it as general as possible. Okay, so once you have a naming standard, I get into the technical stuff because I want to start renaming everything to use my standard. And the first thing I check is what domains are in that environment that I'm looking at. So if you run this command, it's really easy. You'll get a list of all the domains in your environment. You might just have one, which is awesome. And if you have multiple, it's good to go through the steps we're going to talk about for each domain. Okay, so user accounts. We all have tons of stale user accounts probably, unless you're awesome. And
Sorry.
I thought he was saying I shouldn't say unless you're awesome. I'm sure you're all awesome. It will lead you on a path to self-discovery or service account discovery, which is what I find really valuable when I'm looking at environment. If you're going to look at your naming, your user accounts, you'll quickly find things that are used for critical applications or weird mailboxes that run production items and stuff. So the first thing I do when I look at stale user accounts is look for opportunities to populate data. So we all know that it's a security risk and it costs money and whatever, but if you look for opportunities to populate data in Active Directory, all those productivity apps that your users probably don't pay attention to will suddenly become really valuable to them. So SharePoint My Sites and that Outlook People panel, when you populate everybody's name and title and phone number, that can actually become useful to your users. So we have two goals when looking at stale accounts: populate data, and then the way I do that is to just get a list of all the user accounts with a really simple PowerShell command and put it out to CSV and just have a look. If you've got heaps of users or you literally have no data populated and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm never going to get that done, there's some other options. You can push that work back out to your users. So you can use SharePoint My Sites to write that data back. You can allow certain fields to write back to AD, like manager or title, so if people are moving around. But Ben and I have used this little application. It presents a web portal. It's called Ithacus Directory Update. And it just presents a web portal. You can lock it down and present certain fields, and you can put parameters in so they have to enter them in a certain way, pre-populate addresses for sites. And we usually use that to make users populate their own data. So it's really saves you a lot of work. Okay, stale accounts. So this is a real meat and potatoes of this step. In 2003 onward, if you wanted to find stale accounts, you could query the last logon timestamp attribute in Active Directory. And it's good because it's replicated, so it's on every domain controller. But it's not good in the respect that it's only replicated every 14 days to avoid replication overhead. Also, it returns an integer, so if you've ever looked for stale accounts, you would have had to convert that integer to a readable date using another formula or a spreadsheet. which is fixed in 2008 onwards, so you can query the last logon date attribute, and that's converted to readable format, but basically it just relies on that 2003 last logon timestamp attribute, so it's still only replicated every 14 days. And to do that, you can use search AD account. So that's a new commandlet. It's really good, actually. You just type search AD account, inactive users, and this example is for 180 days, and it'll just give you a list. It's really great. Also, you can use that commandlet to search for locked out accounts or accounts that have a non-expiring password, which are not bad to look at while you're looking at your users. I like to use the 2003s and upwards last logon attribute. It's not replicated, so that's a downside. So in theory, you have to query every domain controller in your environment to get the most recent login date for a user. But it returns a readable date and it's up to date. So that's the one I like to use, which sounds like work, but this awesome script from Robert Stacks does all the work for you. So you just run this script. It's in the download pack. It will query every domain controller in your whole environment, and it will grab each user's last logon attribute and keep the latest one. So if I've logged in at Brooklyn, it will keep my last login date from that site and overwrite the others. Then it can send you a list as an email and a spreadsheet to your help desk to say all these accounts are inactive, or you can have it disable them and move them to a disabled users OU if you like, or you can even have it delete users for you. And I like to run that as a scheduled task after I've done a few audits, so it just keeps on keeping all my users up to date. No one looks super impressed by that, but I really like it. Obviously, when you're cleaning up accounts and populating data, you're going to be changing fields like the company and the department. And one thing I've been pinged by in the past is I've changed them studiously and found out that they're used for recipient policies and dynamic distribution lists. So check that, and one easy way is simply just run get email address policy, and it'll pump out all your recipient policies. And you can see this one's using department and company. I'd normally change them to use a custom attribute. No one needs to fiddle with those, so it's pretty good practice, and you'll find they don't get broken as users update their data or help desk updates people's data. So in summary, for your user accounts, which is the first step I like to take, I look for opportunities to populate data in Active Directory so that the data is valuable to my users and any applications that feed from it. And I look at stale accounts. Obviously, for that step, populating data is a bit less risky, but deleting accounts and disabling them is a bit more risky. So be careful and enable your recycle bin and disable accounts and check for inactive mailboxes. If you're not sure if a mailbox is inactive, you can look at message tracking in Exchange to confirm. And if you're not sure about message tracking, because it was a mess to me when I first looked at it, I learned from the Exchange Server Pro blog. He's got a really good post that just shows you how to do message tracking. It's really good. I'll definitely check it out if I was you. And schedule that task, that script as a scheduled task to run regularly if you want to keep things looking good in the long term. It could be every 6 months even. It doesn't need to be that regular. Okay, so you've cleaned up users, which is not too bad, right? But group cleanups has probably been something you've been avoiding, or I used to always avoid it because I tended to have more groups than users almost, and like, where do you start? But don't worry, because I've got this awesome script, as you probably guessed, and I love it. I'm mental about it. So this script will go out and query all the groups in your environment, and then it will compare all the users to each group and give you a list of groups that have duplicate users, and you can adjust the parameters. So you could say, tell me all the groups that are 25% the same or 10% the same, and it will give you a list, so you can look at collapsing those groups down into one group. If you're thinking, yeah, but I don't know where they're used, that's fine too, because Ben's going to show you how to see what file shares you have and what has permissions on them. So you can do this, have a list of groups you think you want to blast, and then use Ben's tip to see where they're used. In addition to that, it will also give you a big list of empty groups or groups that haven't been modified in whatever number of days you specify. So you can also look at groups that might be stale, and obviously your empty groups are a nice easy win. You can just delete all of those straight away. That's in Download Pack 2. Okay, so you've got your users out of the way, you've got your groups sorted out, and now I would normally look at my VMs and servers. In the past, we never really had to worry about efficiency so much when it came to servers because we had a kit and we just used it for 3 to 5 years, and if we needed more RAM or disk, you could probably get approval to add more. But now, if you think about things in a pay-for-what-you-use mindset, or you think about things for the cloud, being efficient is actually becoming more important to us as IT pros. So now having idle machines and machines with more disk and RAM that they need is actually costing us money every month. So I would look at these tools to start auditing my environment. So if you've got VMware, I love vTools. It's really good. It's a little executable. It's free. And you just run it, and it will pump out a list of all of your servers and all the information about them. And I'll show you that in a second. If you're using Hyper-V, there's obviously the VMM PowerShell snap-in's pretty good, and it will do most of those things for you as well. If you have a hybrid environment, a bit of Hyper-V and a bit of VMware, or if you just want something that does a lot of the work for you, VM1 Free Edition is really great, and it's free. It's got a lot of great reports in it, so you can download that. I put a link to it in the download pack. Once I have a list of all my servers, I look for things that can be decommissioned. So obviously your easy wins are idle servers and turned off servers, and then things that look like some old dev test machine, which you've probably all got as part of VM Sprawl. It just spin up a server and then no one remembers what it was used for. Then I look for applications I can consolidate, and then I look for easy wins like disk and RAM and licenses that I can reclaim. And you never really had to worry about that before, but now that actually does cost you money if you're thinking about cloud or you're pricing the cloud and considering it. So this is just a really quick look at vTools. It's an executable. You just run it, and it quickly pumps out a list of everything in your farm. And it will show you all the memory and disk, and if you've got snapshots or CDs attached. But there's one tab I really love called vHealth, and it tells you everything you're doing wrong in your life. So
Everything in your whole life.
Everything you're doing wrong in your life. Once you fix up this tab, your jeans will look nicer, your wife will love you more. I promise, your kids will get straight A's, everything will be good. So that's that. If you have VMware, definitely check it out. Okay, so when I'm looking at server consolidation, I'm making it sound a lot easier. I know it's quite hard, but it's worth the slog. But these are the tips for success. If you're looking at application consolidation or you're trying to decommission things, work with your vendors. You're probably paying for support, so you might as well use it. So use their time and not all your time struggling through. And as you're going through, if you can, rename servers to match your new naming standards so they make sense, and populate your description fields in whatever consoles you're using so everybody else in your team knows what those servers do from now on. And obviously, as you're decommissioning servers, don't forget to clean up things like your backup jobs and your documentation and the computer accounts in AD, because you've gone through and done all this cleaning up and you don't want to leave a big mess behind you. Okay.
Thank you. Right, so once you've gone through and performed this cleanup of your environment for your users and your groups and your VMs, then it's time to have a look at your scheduled tasks and services in your environment. Now, I think we all know that this is a real nightmare for some admins in some environments. Specifically with service accounts, some problems tend not to manifest until the service or the server has been rebooted. And if you've spent the last couple of weeks going through and removing stale accounts as part of Simone's guidance, then identifying where this issue is with the service might not be so easy. We had this developer once who worked for our company that was writing critical business applications that cost our organisation a lot of money if the business ever went offline, if the app ever went offline. Now, these were .NET apps, but instead of writing a service to handle the code execution, he'd just written the code, created a scheduled task, and kicked that off to run every 3 minutes using a domain admin account. I know. He had somehow squirreled domain admin rights and was using, and when he left the company at some stage, of course, we had to leave his account unlocked and running on that service just to keep the application running. Then we started. Hang on, that's not right. There we go.
That's Ben.
That's me. Once we found this application, we then had to go in and figure out exactly how this application ran. We effectively had to learn it to the same point that the developer who had written it. We had to go in, create a new account, delegate the appropriate permissions in the environment, go back and remove it on all the production servers. It was a mess, but by the end, we'd finally got to this point where we could decommission his account. And I know that doesn't sound like a big win, but it really was at the time. And after this process, we realised just how important it is to make sure that as an admin, you're on top of your scheduled tasks and services and how they can betray you if you're not on top of them. Fortunately for you guys, the discovery is quite easy, and we've got a script here that will show you exactly what you need to do in your environment to do this discovery. So let's have a look. So all you do is simply add in your domain information and run this script. So it uses Quest PowerShell snap-in to just run a list of custom functions. So in here, it will go scan every server in your environment and spit out every single service and scheduled task. Now, it is a lot of data, but what it enables you to do is easily go in, select an account to see if people are using personal accounts as services or scheduled tasks. You can see the type, what server they're on, and if they've got any descriptions inside the scheduled task or service. Once you get to this point, it is really important you then go in and you have a look at who's running services as their personal account, or worse, using a domain admin account, and go in and remove this permission from those accounts. Then go in and update all the descriptions in AD for the remainder of the service accounts that you're going to keep in your environment. Once you've got your list of all your scheduled tasks around your environment, it's time to centralize them onto a centralized scheduled task server. Now, this massively simplifies the job of maintaining your tasks across your environment. Not only that, the added benefit we've found is that once you've centralized all of your tasks onto one server, support staff know exactly where to start troubleshooting if a service or if a scheduled task isn't running correctly. And to execute the code remotely, you just use PS Remoting or PS Exec. Now, it's important to note that no application should ever need to run as domain admin. Now, I know in the real world, this isn't always the case, and there are always some examples, but as a general rule, you should always try and limit dealing out this kind of access. Once you've gone back and tackled your domain admin access, it's then time to go in and have a look at what's running as a local admin. Now, it's also probably not workable to go back and remove all of the local admin access for your service accounts and scheduled tasks. But what you can do is just use this as an opportunity, have a look at what you've got, draw a line in the sand, and from now on, be really strict when dealing out this kind of access. Now, the last step for your service account audit is to then go and add all those service accounts to the Deny Logon Local Active Directory group to prevent that account from being able to log on to the console of your servers. Now, if you don't have a group like that set up, then you're going to want to hear this next bit. Your first step would be to create a new account in Active Directory, call it Deny Logon Local Service Accounts or Scheduled Tasks. Then using group policy, go in and add that group into the local user right assignment for the Deny Logon Local User Right Assignment group. What this will enable you to do is prevent any service account from being able to log onto a PC in your domain, which is a big win. The other added step is that you can easily remove the account from this group. If you do ever need to troubleshoot as that service account on the server, you can just remove it, perform your troubleshooting, and then add it back in when you're finished, knowing that no one else in your organization is going to be able to access the console using that account. You can also do this for Deny Logon as a service and Deny Logon as a batch job if you've got troublesome people in IT who are consistently logging on and creating services using their personal accounts, which we've found very helpful in the past.
For developers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And alternatively, you can do the same as well to allow logon as a batch job and allow logon as a service as an easy way to allow that permission. Now, it's important to note as well that if you're lucky enough to have decommissioned all the legacy hardware in your environment and are running a 2012 domain functional level, then you can just use group managed service accounts to let Active Directory handle the password resetting of your service accounts, which is a huge win for any security admins in the audience. All right, so some tips for success with scheduled tasks and services. They're often big unknowns for admins, and they pose a pretty big risk when you're looking at security uptime for your critical applications. There are free scripts available to help you perform your discovery. Always utilize least privilege principles when dealing out access for service accounts and scheduled tasks, and where possible, add these accounts to the Deny Logon Local Active Directory group. Now, unnecessary admin rights can spell disaster for any admin trying to maintain a clean environment. Fortunately, bad practice is relatively easy to spot. Not only that, Microsoft have got a best practices guidelines that outline everything we're going to talk about today with relation to domain admin credentials, and we've included a copy of this in the download pack if you're interested. Now, there's no point going through and cleaning up your entire environment if every single person in IT has the ability to go in and undo all of your hard work. Now, once you've checked all your scheduled tasks and services, you can be fairly confident that if you're going to go in and decommission domain admin privilege from people's personal accounts, that it's not going to affect production. So it is really important that before you start down this process, you've gotten on top of your scheduled tasks and services to completely rule that out. As a tip, I would remove anyone that isn't directly a part of the systems administration team or the database administration team. Go in and delegate the appropriate rights in Active Directory for the other users of your team, and then in any Microsoft applications using role-based access control. Now, if you're not sure where to start with these groups, there are very, very simple commands you can run, just like the one up on screen. They'll just spit out a list of all of the admin groups in your organization, and from there you can build out a list of users and just see who needs to go. Once you've gotten your list of users, it's then time to delegate the appropriate rights in Active Directory. So there's a script in the download pack that will go in and scan all the OUs in your organisation and spit out all of the delegate permissions on all of the OUs inside Active Directory, which is really handy for you to just do a quick audit of what you've got before you then start delegating more permissions. Specifically with domain admin access, what we'll do is we'll just use Help Desk as an example, because what we found is they often have admin rights unnecessarily. Go into Active Directory and create yourself a Help Desk group, and then in the root of Active Directory, add that new group, the following delegate permissions inside the root of AD. Then using group policy, you can go in and add this new group into the local administrators group on all of the desktops. Then finally, get them to test and then remove them from the domain admin group. Right. Now the last step is in your domain admins group, you're going to be left with a core group of members who are still going to have domain admin rights. It is extremely important that you then also remove this permission from their day-to-day accounts. Create them new .adm accounts that match the exact same logon name with .adm at the end. Add the domain admin permission to this user, and this is the user that they use to run administrative tasks as. By the end of this whole process, you will have no one left in your organisation that is logging onto PCs using a domain admin permission. One added step that you can do that we've had a lot of success with in the past is to create a special OU in AD somewhere, lock it down so that only domain admins can modify group membership of any of the groups that live in this OU, and move all of your protected groups into this OU. So domain admins, schema admins, or enterprise admins AD groups. The last step, if you want to add another layer to this, or you don't want to lock it down, is to just use whatever reporting software that you're using. Configure a report to simply just let you know when the group membership changes. This way you know in real time the second the membership changes. All right, some tips for success. This needs to be done before you start the environment cleanup process. Always utilise least privilege principles when dealing out access for domain admins. Don't be lazy with the admin access. Delegate the appropriate permissions in Active Directory. And where possible, create the .adm accounts for the users instead of them running domain admin on their normal day-to-day accounts.
Okay, so when I first started in IT, group policy is one of my favourite things, and I still love it, but auditing it is not what I ever loved. And if you're like me and you've ever had to sit there for 4 hours and figure out why this IE trusted site is not applying to some user because 20 policies are applying IE trusted sites, you're going to love this script I'm going to show you in a second. So this script I'm going to show you is by Ashley McGlone. He's called the Goatee PFE, and he has a treasure trove of scripts on his blog. It's like my favourite blog ever. But there's two that I love in particular. One will pump out a list of all your group policies just for auditing, so it lists all of the group policies, when they were last modified, a basic list of the settings, just a really good overview. So if you're not sure, you can just run it. That's pretty cool, I guess, but this one will go through your entire environment. It will scan all of your group policies, and it will give you a list of them. And then it will tell you which ones have duplicate settings. So you can filter by, say, what settings in Internet Explorer in Excel, and then you can see the different policies that are applying that. And then you can look at collapsing those policies down into one policy, so you never have to do that 5-hour troubleshooting task again. And what I normally do is do this, and then create a new policy at the highest level possible, put the settings I think belongs in it, disable the ones below, and see if it works. And if it doesn't, you can quickly enable them again to get everybody working and investigate a bit further. But you all don't look nearly as excited as I am about this script, but I love it. I definitely think you should have a look at it in your environment. So as I just said, when you're looking at group policy, it's not actually hard to audit anymore. Like, it goes from being, this huge task that you avoid to just being a couple of days' work. So the things I've learned the hard way in the past are to definitely export policies. So they might seem like easy wins to delete empty policies or unlinked policies or unused policies, but just export them. You can quickly put them back if something goes wrong, which it might. And when I'm going through and auditing, I like to update the name and put my SOAP card in a descriptive name so someone else on my team can know what it does and they don't edit it incorrectly in the future. And obviously, removing duplication is our goal here. So you have one policy that applies Internet Explorer settings for as many users as you possibly can. Then, once you've got it cleaned up, I would try to automate new policy creation as much as possible. So we use PowerShell scripts, or if you don't want to use that, you could use group policy templates. Or if some of the places we've worked, you apply a similar policy to lots of different OUs, and I would just use a copy and paste in group policy to get almost the exact settings and change one or two things, like a map drive or whatever. If you have some questions about that script, check out Ashley McGone's blog. It's answers every question you could have, and it's really hilarious. Probably much more hilarious than me this hour of the morning. Okay, so we've cleaned up most of the objects within inside Active Directory now, in our minds. And the next thing I would do is give Active Directory a makeover. And this isn't a critical step, but I love organising things. So for me, this is my favourite step. So I would create an OU structure that looks like this, and I create an OU for each site in AD. And then I create sub-OUs for users and groups and desktops and laptops. And obviously, I name all the objects within there, put the site code and descriptions and stuff in it. You can use Active Directory sites and services to push out group policy to sites, but I often find this is much easier, and it's easier for the rest of the team to go and look, because a lot of people don't even look at sites and services for group policy. Also, you can use this to target users for scripts or deployments or software, SSCM or PowerShell. It's really handy. There's a couple of things to consider though. Obviously be careful if you're going to move users into that new structure, because new group policies will apply and old ones won't. So again, I create a policy that I think has all the settings that duplicates the other one, and then just disable the ones I think I've replaced. So if something goes wrong, you just put your users back where they were, re-enable policies, and then you've got time to investigate without anyone screaming down your neck. Okay, so FSMA roles is a massive topic, and don't worry, we're not going to get into that in depth today, but there's two things I care about when I'm looking at an environment's health, and that is, where are my FSMA roles, and do I need to move them? To find out where they are, you can just say get AD domain, and it will give you a list of everything that's pertinent about your domain, including where are your FSMA roles. And I'm looking for things like, are they on a domain controller that's not at my colo or head office site, whatever's my primary site, and are they on a domain controller that's like about to be decommissioned, or that's the dead one that always fails, or something like that. So normally if I have one of those, I'd just move them around. There's a lot of good advice on the TechNet blogs on where they should go and how you should place them. But really, the first step you just need to take is make sure they're in a good, safe domain controller in your data center and understand where they are. So if you're going to decommission things or reboot servers, you know which ones are the most critical in your environment. And if you want a reminder of the FSMA roles, that's them. So just take a mind screenshot of that. Okay, so once I've got all that done, the next thing I turn to is sites and services. And sites and services is a big topic. So we're going to quickly go through it, but in a bit more depth than the other topics. It's used to optimize replication. It's used to locate the closest domain controller for your users when they log in or access a DFS share, or services that do that kind of thing. And it also replicates the sysvol share around. So this is a really complicated picture of a sites and services environment that I just stole from Microsoft TechNet blatantly. And we're going to talk about a really simple environment while we look at that really complicated picture. So just stick with me. So each of these blue circles is a site in Active Directory, sites and services. And in each site, there's domain controllers and all your subnets. So in that diagram, BH stands for bridgehead. So that's the domain controller in a site that communicates with all the other domain controllers on behalf of sites and services. And global catalog, most of our DCs are a global catalog these days. It stores a copy of your entire Forest Active Directory locally. What I'm interested in on this diagram is the red line. So they're our site links, and we assign a cost to those so we can let the knowledge consistency checker know which ones are the right ones to use for replication. Okay, so all of your domain controllers and subnets and the red lines make up your site topology. And the site topology is used by the knowledge consistency checker to generate your Active Directory replication topology. So that's those blue arrows there. And Active Directory replication topology is what replicates those changes you make. So if you're making a change to a user's password and it takes half an hour for them to be able to log in at the site they're at, that's those blue arrows not being optimized or not working in the best way possible. And if you're creating a user and it doesn't appear for like a day, it's sites and services that's the reason for that. So despite being really critical, it's often neglected, I think because it doesn't complain a lot. So sites and services will just limp along even when it's super unhealthy, and that's my catastrophic diagram.
That's good.
I'm really good at graphics, if anyone wants some graphics done. So it's still worth understanding your topology though and optimizing it, even though it does keep limping along, because you can fix up those problems. So when you reset a password for a user, they're not going to lock themselves out straight away because it hasn't replicated yet to their site. So the first thing I look at when I'm looking at sites and services, where are my domain controllers and how are they configured? And again, there's a really easy PowerShell one-liner that can give you that information. And it pumps out a list like this, which is really great. And I'm usually interested in that yellow column site, so those blue circles on that diagram that I stole. And as you probably expected, I have a really great script that will go through and do most of the work for you now. So this script is awesome. It's really simple. It will go through and list out all of your sites, the domain controllers that are inside that blue circle, and all the subnets that are associated with it. And straight away, you can have a look at your site names and see opportunities to rename those sites to match your naming standard. So that's a really good first step. It doesn't break anything. You just right-click and say rename, and then you can rename it, and you can go through and set them all to be lovely. Then if you want to be excellent, you can go in and populate the description field so it's friendly for anyone else who's having a look in there, or put any other descriptions that are required. Next, I look on your busiest domain controller. There's a debug netlogon.log file, and that shows you all the users who are logging in with a subnet that's not associated with the site. So if you log in with an IP address, it doesn't belong to one of those blue circles. It will be in this log. Then I take the IP addresses I find in that log and add them into subnets. So you need to allocate your subnets to a site. So you just right-click in Sites and Services and say Add Subnet. If it's a small site, or say it's your VPN or something that doesn't have an actual site in Active Directory, I add it to my data center subnet or my head office subnet. Next, have a look for domain controllers that have been decommissioned but not deleted. And this is an often missed step next to subnets as well, because it's not done automatically with DC Promo. So you'll probably find, if you've had someone who didn't know that you'll have dead domain controllers sitting there empty. Finally, we want to have a look at the replication and the link costs, because that's probably the most visible issue that you'll end up with in your environment is replication delays. You can do that in the console, or you can do it with PowerShell, which is really easy. So this is how you look at your replication costs and your replication schedules. And if you've got 2012, it's really easy, just one word. If you don't, it's a little bit longer, but still just as effective. If you can remember that at the end, I'll buy you full-size Snickers, as Ben likes to say. So once you've run that script, one of those two PowerShells, you end up with something like this. And it just tells you your site replication, the cost of those links, so those red lines, how often it replicates, what's the schedule, and then this mysterious options column. So that one means that we have change replication turned on. That means as soon as a change is made, replicate it. And most of the TechNote articles say turn that on for everything now, right? But in Australia, we don't often have the best bandwidth. So I really only turn it on for sites that have really good links between them. So say our head office and data center, or if you've got really good CBD sites or something. Then the mysterious site link cost, this is how you calculate them correctly. So I find it's easy just to put that in a spreadsheet and populate all of my site costs and then just go ahead and set them all in one go. I put that formula in the download pack too, so you don't need to remember it. So that's sites and services, and this is my tips for success. So don't create sites in Active Directory if you don't need to. So if you don't have a domain controller or a DFS share it site, you don't need to create one of those blue circles, one of those sites. You can just add those subnets to one of your main sites, so head office or your colos is normally a good candidate. But make sure you don't have orphan subnets sitting out there, because it doesn't know where those users belong. Let the knowledge consistency checker manage and optimize your replication partners for you. And you do that by setting all your sites up and making sure your site link costs are correct and your subnets are all associated with something. And once you've done that, test your changes by forcing replication and looking at your domain controllers. So your DC logs will be full of errors if you've made a mistake, or you might see things like users still having replication delays. So check your replication schedule and your site link costs and your subnets. And if you see more errors that aren't that simple, you can use repadmin or ntdsutil to really dig into your replication topology and troubleshoot those errors. Finally, to avoid this happening again, update your site creation and your deletion scripts or checklists or whatever you use. I usually find everywhere I've ever been and ever worked that you've always got orphan subnets, because people create sites and domain controllers and don't know they need to add those subnets to a site in Active Directory. And I also find people forget to delete domain controllers out, so they just sit there and the knowledge consistency checker pumps out heaps of errors saying it can't generate a full topology and it can't replicate. And you know that that DC can just get deleted and it fixes it right up. So sites and services doesn't work very well at all, or nothing actually works very well if DNS isn't configured well, so Ben's going to talk about that.
That's right. Thank you. So for DNS, we only briefly wanted to touch on this because even though it does underpin everything in your environment, it's actually really easy to find out everything that you need to know about your DNS infrastructure using PowerShell scripts. So this script we want to show will just punch out a list of everything you need to know about your DNS infrastructure. Let's take a look. So all you do is enter your domain information, and then you can use these functions that are included to export a list of everything you need to know. So I've just included the 2 discovery reports. So the first discovery report gives you a list of absolutely everything you need to know about each of the zones on each of your domain controllers. So whether scavenging is enabled, so there you can see all the zones, the replica type, and whether scavenging is enabled, which is really important. The second discovery report just gives you all the specific information about each of your DNS servers. So the IP address, the forwarders that are set, the search order, and the scavenging interval for that as well. Yep, that's all we wanted to cover on that. For scavenging, this is really important that you've got this enabled in your environment on at least one DNS server. Just be really careful with this setting because it will go in and delete records out of your zones. One tip is to, before you enable it on a zone, is to just export that zone to a text file and let the support staff know where this backup is for them to use as a reference. In case something critical breaks, they can just go back in and just add in the record that's missing. And if you need to keep a star record for whatever reason, you just need to go into the record itself and just untick scavenging from that record, and the scavenging won't clean it up. Now, before you can do something in your environment like standardize all the map drives across every single site in your company, you need to first get your shares in order. Specifically with file server shares, we try and keep 1 share per production server. The only time we have ever really needed to have more than 1 share per server is when we've had multiple volumes on that server that we need to share out. So just as a general rule, try and keep 1 share where you can. If you're not sure where to start with the discovery process for your shares, as part of the sysinternal suite, there's Shares and Elm, which is a Microsoft product, and there are also a lot of PowerShell scripts out there that can help you perform your discovery really easy. Now, with the shares that are in production on your application servers, there's probably not a lot you can do about them, but what you can do is get your report to have a full list of all of your shares just to assist with the troubleshooting, and then be really strict from now on when dealing out shares on your production servers. Just try and keep to 1 share per server. All right, once your shares are done, it's time to audit your file server permissions. Now, I think we all know that file server permissions have the potential to become a horrendous mess of different shares and folders and files, and some protected and some unprotected, and it can be a real mess. And it can be quite complicated to get an overview of what's there. Unless you're using PowerShell scripts, that is. So this script outputs a full list of all of the permissions on each of the folders and files in the subfolder that you specify. So it's very, very basic script. It's just got every single file there, every account that's added onto that file, and then the type of permission for that account. Your best bet here is to use this as a reference, create new department folders for your site, go sit with the users, and break all their shortcuts. Unfortunately, this is the best approach. Go sit with the managers and the content owners, reorganize all their data into the proper department headers. One tip is to be strict when dealing out security groups for locking down a directory. Not every single folder on your file server needs to be locked down, regardless of what the user says. Lock down the big ones, obviously, like HR, finance, or like IT, but leave the rest open for general access, because this will make applying security templates a lot easier. Now for my favourite part, security templates.
It's really his favourite, he loves it.
I do. So just a show of hands, are there any security admins in the audience? Have we got any? I understand why you wouldn't want to put your hand up. We've got one at the back. We've got one lone security admin.
I'll be one too.
You're one too. Can you just be a security admin as well?
I'm not really.
Do you use security templates to keep your file server structure from changing? Simone, have you ever used that?
I have not.
Would you like to learn more?
Please tell me more.
I would love to show you more. So the security templates are a great way to stop the permissions that you set on your file server from changing. And it's free, for one, easy to implement solution, and it's part of Microsoft. But possibly the best thing that I like about security templates is it's already on your file server right now. All you need to do is apply it. So if you don't believe me that it's easy to implement, we've got a quick demo to run you through from start to finish how to get this configured and running in your environment. Let's take a look. So all you do is go into a management console and add in the security configuration and security template snap-in. Then go in, add in your new template, like just create a new one. Then go in to add the folders that you then want to add permissions onto. One tip here is to add the default user group that's built into Windows. Just read-only access to the root of your file server. This way the users don't have access to go in and add new department headers. This is up to IT. So once you go in and then you add your root directory, then you go in and add all the groups, all the folders that you want to protect. So this isn't every single folder in your file server, just the ones that you want to lock down. So for this example, we're going to use finance, HR, and IT. So in that directory, there's 20 folders, but we're only adding the 4 that we want to lock down. Once you're happy with you got your template the way you want it, you simply save it, go in and create a new database. This is just a .db file. It just stores like a bit of text, not a SQL database or anything. Go in, analyze your computer. Once you go into the file system, you'll see there that there are folders that are no longer compliant. The last step, go in, configure your computer, let it run, reanalyze the server, go back into the file system, and if it's applied correctly, you'll see all green ticks on the folders that are now compliant.
I think that was a bit fast for everyone. There was a lot of laughing. I was like, oh my God.
We have a lot to cover today, so we had to try and fit as much.
He loves these. Like, he would talk to you about them for just the whole day. So just catch him.
I'm happy to talk to you afterwards if you have any questions.
Literally the whole day. Like, have an escape plan.
The best thing, the thing that I think is the best thing about the security templates is once you've got your template the way you like it, you can script the application of that template on your file server. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because with this type of application for your security, you can then allow, say, your support staff access to go in and make changes on your file server to get a user out of trouble without having to let you know what's happened. Then they send you an email, and then you've got a full week to go in and add that into the template, and then on Saturday it'll get overridden, right? Where it really gets interesting is, say a support staff member makes a mistake on a file server and wipes all the permissions on the file server. All they have to do is go into the scheduled task server that you've centralized from the earlier slides, go in, find the server from the scheduled task, run it, and it will automatically reset all the permissions on the file server, all without you having to do a single thing, which is really, really important. All right, some tips for success. Use shares and or PowerShell scripts to do the discovery of the shares in your environment. Try and keep 1 share per production server where you can. Use the same department folders at all of your sites. This way it'll keep the security templates nice and simple. Reduce complexity by removing read-only groups where you can. Odds are you never need read-only groups in your environment. And use security templates on your file servers to keep everything nice and tidy. Workstations. So one of the great grey areas of the systems admin world seems to be, do I need to worry about the desktops? Can I just leave this up to the support desk to maintain the desktops and I can get on with running the servers? Do I need to worry about the desktops? I would say, no, don't be worried, be terrified. Be terrified of whatever fresh hell could be waiting for you on any one of the thousands of desktops in your organisation. And let me tell you, the bigger your organisation is, the more important it is to have a procedure in place to prevent a workstation from turning into a critical station. Now, before we get started on how to manage that, there's a quick, we just thought we'd quickly mention, the same script that Simone used to clean up the user accounts in AD can be used to clean up the stale computer accounts. Now, it's really important before you perform the discovery in your environment that you go in and remove anything old that hasn't logged onto the domain in, say, 6 months using the same script. So it's the same process as before. Now, the first step in your desktop audit is to perform a discovery of everything that you've got in your environment. So for this, scripts don't really work. What we've used in the past is Lansweeper, or we recommend SCCM for this, but if you don't have SCCM in your environment, then we just recommend using Lansweeper. Go in and audit all of the applications in your environment, then go and create an applications catalog. Now, an apps catalog contains all of the pertinent information for all of the production applications that are installed on your desktop infrastructure. So using an example, we have a component inside our SAP GUI that requires Java to run. So on a lot of the desktops that have got Java installed, we need the SAP GUI installed, we need to have Java installed for that to run. So in the apps catalog, we put SAP GUI as a dependency on Java. And the other step is that you add all of the testing steps that a client would take after we've updated the client to test the application. So if the help desk go and install an update to Java on all the PCs, all they need to do is go into the apps catalog, have a look at what the users would follow in order to test the application after an update, test it. If they confirm that it works, then go and roll out Java, confidently knowing that it's not going to break the application that depends on it. Now, the next step is to create a known applications landscape. So for this, we recommend AppLocker because we've had a lot of success with it in the past, and it really can be quite effective and make a really positive impact within your organisation. Now, for starters, the price is right because it's free, and it's an easy way to permit or deny the key applications in your environment. All you need to do is just simply enable it inside a new group policy and have a look at the audit rules to see what you need to do to build out your rules. So to show you how easy it is, we're just going to run you through a quick setup from start to finish to show you how just to get this up and running in your environment. So the first step, create a new group policy, and you just set the AppLocker to audit only, just initially, so you can build out your list of rules. So once you've got that in, you go in and start creating your first rules. So you need to do 2 separate sections, executables, and then the installer file types. Now, it's important to note that if you're running a CCM, you'll also need to manually add the allow rules in for a CCM, but Windows will automatically add in by default some rules when you create your first rule. So once I've finished this, you'll see it'll populate with 4. That's just some default rules that Windows thinks you'll need. So once you've got that done, you then go into AppLocker, you go into the event viewer, right? AppLocker's got its own event viewer, and you can see there when it's blocking something, good or bad, it'll show up in that event viewer, and you'll be able to go then and fine-tune your rules. Once you've fine-tuned your rules to see where you want it to go, all you need to do is then go into that policy, flick it from audit only to enforce, and AppLocker's live. It's that easy. Now, one of the biggest things with AppLocker is that the domain admins group has access to go in and install anything through AppLocker. The rule is just allow ***, right? It's a really good idea to create a new group in Active Directory, call it allow miscellaneous installs, give it the same exact permissions that the domain admin group has inside AppLocker, so that if you're ever stuck and say you've got an end user that urgently needs to install a piece of software over the top of AppLocker, all you need to do is get that user account, add it into the new group that you've created, and then they run the install, it's up and running, and then you can remove them. And this way you don't have to modify group policy to get this to work. There is also a script blocker that's a part of this, and we have used it in the past, but we had some problems. A lot of the installs for like third-party apps, they actually run hidden scripts in the background, like VB scripts and things like that. And if you turn on Script Blocker, it can block a lot of the installs. So it's really important that if you do enable it, you just have to be very vigilant of the AppLocker event viewer when installs are failing. Just keep it always in the back of your mind. But we have used it in the past, and it is quite effective to stop end users from running scripts on their desktops unnecessarily. All right, some tips for success. Have a plan for your desktop standardization. Try and keep an applications register to keep track of all the production applications that sit on your desktop infrastructure, and give AppLocker a chance. I promise, once it's in and running, it'll save you a lot of problems to do with the operating system for your desktop infrastructure. Now, unfortunately, we're running a bit short on time, so we're not going to be able to cover everything. But here, if you're interested, there's all this information here is also in the download pack, and we've included a lot of it. So if you're interested, go back and check it out. It's worth a read.
Okay, so thanks for all coming so bright and early to our session, laughing at Ben's jokes, not mine, but that's all right. We covered naming standards, which I quite like, and we showed you the tools that we love to discover our environment, mostly Active Directory domain services and its components, as well as the workstations and the file servers, shares and permissions. And we showed you what issues we look for, mostly because we've experienced them in the past the hard way, and gave some suggestions to keep things looking good long term. Oh, Ben's going to click it for me.
I'm going to click it for you.
This is good service.
Yeah.
So please complete your evaluations. We're new, so it'll be great to get some feedback. And you can win prizes. And this is the link. So if you go to that link, or I'll tweet it from my Twitter later as well if you don't write it down. We packaged up everything into each of those topics, so all the scripts are in there.
I know security templates was your favourite, so we've got the as build in there as well.
Yeah,
I can see it was your favourite.
People are rushing for it.
Yeah,
right
they're
now,
rushing for it.
So we also put things like if I've done change request templates and stuff, so you can even just use our documentation and our design guides and stuff. But if there's anything you thought was awesome and you'd like to talk about more, mostly security templates, Ben is there, or come and catch me if you see me around. I'm normally just wandering around in the day, so just come and say hello and talk to me about it. Else, catch us on Twitter, and that's a hashtag for our session. So continue your learning journey.
What time have we got?
We've got a couple of times for questions.
Yeah, has anyone got any questions?
But you need to put that slide up or we'll get in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Continue learning. Okay, now go back to that one. Yep.
With the group cleanup,
Yep.
does that integrate with the
I don't think it. I don't know if it works for Office 365. Sorry, I just.
Yeah, I would assume that when you run your group, is this about the sync from your into your tenant? Yeah. Okay. So.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we did was focus on stuff that's in a legacy environment, preventing you from doing all that new excellent stuff. So everywhere I've worked, I couldn't move forward because there was so much of this stuff just preventing it. Like people go, oh, just upgrade your workstations to Windows 8 and just delete all this, and you're like, I don't even know what that would do. So what I focus on is, if you haven't even got to that awesome stage yet, this is how you get your head around it. But I'm not sure. I can have a play with it tonight and see.
To do with the sync though, if you clean up those stale accounts, then the next time that does sync, it will go and mark those as inside Office 365 as well. The next time your sync runs.
Excellent. Is anyone else have questions?
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
When you did the app locker audit mode, how do you have to run that for?
How long do you have to run app locker audit mode?
You just
Oh, the audit.
automatically.
Yeah. So we cut.
So should you run it for a week?
Maybe half a second if you take Ben's demo. No.
Yeah.
Probably like a week or two, I would say. So you can get a good audit of all the applications that a user runs, and that it would block when you turn it on active. Is that what you would say?
Yeah.
So when I've done audits sometimes in the past, like that kind of thing, I also keep in mind some applications don't run until the end of the month. So you've got your payroll team who maybe only use the app at the end of the month. So keep that in mind as well when you're doing audits. Sometimes you just set that stuff and then come back, and when you have a day, you just put your headphones on and go through data, which I quite like doing. Then I'd collect it all and go through it. But auditing stuff for a long time is always good because you're going to catch more stuff. Anybody else? Okay, well, I think that's all. Thanks so much for coming
Thank you
so early.
so much, guys. Really appreciate it.